The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 15th century was one of the most important events in human history. Often called the Gutenberg Revolution, this innovation transformed the way information was produced and shared, making books more accessible and helping to spread knowledge across Europe. Johannes Gutenberg was born in Mainz, Germany, around the year 1400. Trained as goldsmith, he had experience work with metal, a skill that later played a key role in developing his printing technology. At that time, producing books was slow, costly, and labor-intensive. Gutenberg's great innovation was to create a system that allowed individual letters and symbols to be arranged and reused to print different pages. The system is known as movable type. Gutenberg cast small metal letters that could be placed in a frame to form words and sentences. Once arranged, ink was applied to the letters and paper was pressed on top to create a printed page. He also developed a special ink that adhered well to the metal type, and he adopted a screw press, originally used for pressing wine, to apply even pressure to the paper. Between 1452 and 1455, Gutenberg printed his most famous work, the 42-line Bible, named after the number of lines in each of its columns, also known as the Gutenberg Bible. This was the first major book printed with movable type in Europe. Around 180 copies were produced, and many of them still survive today. Even though Gutenberg lost his workshop, the revolution he had started continued to spread at an unstoppable pace. In fact, a dramatic event helped accelerate this process. The sack of Mainz in 1462 forced the main printers to flee the city, carrying the new printing technology with them across Europe. This untidy dispersion turned out to be a decisive factor in the rapid spread of the press. By 1500, printing presses had been established in more than 240 cities across the continent, and millions of books had already been produced. These early printed books are known as incunabula, a term derived from the Latin word for cradle, symbolizing the birth of print culture. This rapid expansion of printing can be explained by a unique combination of historical factors. First, paper, much cheaper than parchment, was now widely available, making mass production possible. At the same time, demand for written material was growing. The church, universities, legal institutions, and the increasingly literate lay public all needed texts for various purposes. The economic context was also favorable. As market economies developed, books began to be treated as commercial products, not just scholarly or religious tools. Moreover, the mobility of skilled printers, many originally trained in Germany, allowed printing to spread quickly and adapt to different cultural and linguistic settings. What's especially interesting is that Europe's printing revolution, while groundbreaking, was not entirely without precedent. But its true importance lies not only in the number of books produced, but in how it transformed the very nature of the book itself. Printing text introduced a level of standardization and consistency that had never existed before. Scholars could now refer to the same edition of a work, promoting shared understanding and scholarly dialogue. New features such as title pages, page numbers, indexes, and errata sheets made books easier to use, cite, and correct. The book was no longer just a container of knowledge, but a structured and navigable tool for learning. Moreover, the invention of the printing press was a turning point for philology, establishing a fixed and stable text and reducing the variability in manuscript transmission. The printing press introduced a higher degree of linguistic standardization, particularly with regard to the morphology and orthography of languages. This also led to development of new philological methods, specifically tailored to printed texts. The cultural consequences were enormous. As books became more affordable and widely available, literacy rates began to rise, particularly among the emerging middle class. The spread of print helped standardize both language and knowledge, reducing regional variations and minimizing the copying errors that had plagued manuscript culture. It also created a completely new pathway for the circulation of ideas. One striking example is the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther's 95 Theses spread quickly across Europe thanks to the press, sparking religious debate and transformation. In a similar way, science flourished in this new environment, as researchers could now share their findings in print, compare data, and engage in collective inquiry. In short, the printing press reshaped how people read, thought, and communicated, laying the very foundation for modernity itself.